Hi guys, Dr. Ken Nordberg again. I've got another interesting YouTube presentation here today. This one about scouting. Uh, Actually, it's about my son John's recent scouting in the latter part of September. I wasn't able to go along. I'm getting prepared for some more surgery. Yeah, I'm getting sick of it. Trying to work it out, this surgery schedule, so I'll be back in shape early enough to get out and do some more scouting before, at least 2 weeks before the deer season begins, or firearm season. But I was so anxious to get up there, and I just felt awful the whole time he was gone, wishing I was up there too. And because I got 3 bucks I want to check up on before the deer season starts, and I can't wait to get up there and do that. And some potential stand sites that I'm going to use this year, new ones, of course. Ground level, of course. The old guy, he sits at ground level almost all the time. Although there's one spot I'm going to look at, and I might need to use a tree stand there, because it's pretty thick cover there. And the trail I want to watch, because I want to get on one certain spot where deer can't get behind me, big beaver pond behind me, when the wind's right, from the south particularly. I might have to put a tree stand up there to hunt that properly. And but if I do, I won't be any higher than 9 feet. That's plenty high enough. I'll be darned if I'm going to sit 17, 18 feet above the ground, fatal level. I don't know why, guys. You don't have to sit that high to take whitetails. To take the biggest buck in the woods, you don't have to be that high. That's silly. Well, anyway, I want to tell you about John's experience up there. When he went up there a week or so ago, of course, it's been raining a lot of water up there. Snow up there. Got snow up there this morning on the ground. It's all white up there right now. It's been really wet there, and foliage is growing. The trees, the little saplings that were only little 3-footers last fall are now 6, 8 feet tall, and things have grown just like crazy this past year. Now, he spent 3 days up there, and in all that time, he couldn't find one measurable track made by a mature buck. And that's pretty common when you're out there scouting that early in the year. Hard to find tracks. But just the same, he found a lot of signs that we could call buck signs up there that make it possible to start figuring out where he wants to hunt this year. Somebody can't wait. He found so many signs made by older bucks in 2 areas that he can't wait to hunt those spots this fall. There's still trail work to do, and we've got another couple square miles that he and I both would like to scout that we haven't touched yet. We haven't been to those spots yet. So we'll be getting up there later, maybe a couple weeks from now, if everything works all right. And so, but let me tell you about what he found, and how, what he did find is deer droppings. It might be hard to see tracks at that time of year, but it just seems like, unless leaves are just pouring down right, at the present when you're out there, which will be happening later on in October, you can't, one kind of sign you're going to see everywhere. You really will, if you keep your eyes peeled for them, is deer droppings. There's going to be deer droppings. And deer droppings can tell you a lot. Look at, here's my 10th edition of Whitetail Hunter's Almanac. Here, I'm going to show you a couple things. Here on page 172 is a chart that tells you what kind of deer made what size tracks in the woods here in Minnesota, and all the way from Montana to New York, Virginia, Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, the Dakotas, Montana, whitetails. And it goes like this. Let me just read this out. Now, my set of whitetail sign guides includes a track guide as well. Now, during my first, about 30 years of research with whitetails, my track measurements included dew claws, and little pointy things that stick down behind the hoofs of whitetails. You don't see them on firm, dry soil. You don't see those marks. And this can be true all through southern part of the United States. And but here in Minnesota on soft soils or in snow, you see them all the time. So I used that measurement a lot for many years, and I figured out the size of the hoof alone. When you have a hoof to a dew claw measurement, hoof alone is 2/3 of the size of the measurement from tip through dew claw. Well, that's kind of cumbersome. So finally I decided, let's just get the dew claw measurement out of it. And on this page in the book are the measurements done with just hoof only. And the little dew claws are shown in the pictures, but the measurements are for the hoof only, not including the dew claws. And for example, here, let me read this to you. Where we hunt a fawn, we'll have a track that measures 2 to 2 3/8 inch in length. No other deer in the woods makes a track that size in where we hunt. Probably anywhere from here to Maine. A track 2 5/8 inch in length is made by a yearling doe. They're 120-pound deer normally on the average, and that's the length of their hoof only. Mature doe or yearling buck, now they're the same size deer. They'll range in size from 140 to 150 pounds. There are some 170-pound does in Minnesota, but they're fat, but their hoofs aren't any bigger. They're still 3 to 3 1/8 inch in length. So it might be impossible to decide whether that was a mature doe, a doe 2.5 years of age or older that made the track. But if you see fawn tracks or smaller tracks accompanying those tracks, then you know it's a doe. But if you see 3 3 1/8 inch long tracks that are not accompanied by anything else, good chance it's a yearling buck, because during their yearling year they'll spend a lot of time away from their mothers and exploring and trying to pal up with other bucks, or sometimes they just want to fight with them. They love to battle, and so the chances are, if they're alone and no other smaller tracks with it, it's probably a yearling buck. There's other ways to determine that, but anyway, if it's a 2.5-year-old buck, that's not a huge buck. They get up to 195 pounds in Minnesota, but their antlers aren't real large. They've got a spread of maybe 12, 14 inches, 6 to 8 points usually where we hunt. But their tracks will measure 3 3/8 inches. Now, anytime you find tracks that are 3 5/8 inches to 4 inches in length, just a hoof only, that's a big, mature buck. That's the kind of buck we like to hunt, Nordberg's hunt. So we key on those tracks. When we scout, we're looking for those tracks. Now, we've been scouting this area since 1990. And we don't spend just a couple days on one weekend before a hunting season scouting. We go up there a couple times and spend as much as 8 days scouting. And boy, we really cover the country. We got 10 square miles we hunt. Now, half of that I hardly ever see. 2 of my other sons hunt that other half, that other 5 square mile. But part that John and I hunt, we cover that pretty well, the 2 of us. And we're able to find deer droppings and other deer signs rather quickly every year, because locations of doe home ranges and buck ranges hardly change at all over the years unless they're logged or big fire or something happens. And of course they change, our deer migrate to wintering areas in the winter, and when they're gone, they're not there. But at any rate, uh, we know pretty much where to look, which trails to look at, which areas to go through looking for signs. Well, this year John did it all by himself, and he did some trail work too. Cleaned up some past trails we used, deer trails, connecting deer trails that we used to get into different areas where we hunt, going to stand sites. And he has yet to decide exactly where he's going to sit anywhere up there. He still has that to do. He's got to select stand sites yet. That's pretty important yet, thing to do. But now he knows where he wants to hunt, the vicinities of the areas he wants to hunt, because of what he found. So, now, we have a similar guide for droppings. Now, he didn't find any buck size or tracks up there while I was scouting for those 3 days. But he found lots of droppings, because usually they're going to be there no matter what. They're up on top. They don't sink into the ground. They're on top of the leaves. No leaves have fallen yet. So he's pretty good at it. He's very good at spotting droppings in the woods. A lot of times when we're together out there, he'll be calling me back, "Dad, come and see this." And geez, I have to go back there and look at what? I just came through there. And they said, "Oh crap, there's some big droppings made by a big buck." Now droppings have the same kind of thing. You know, here, see this guide? You're almost 100% accurate when you go by the measurements of droppings for various classes of deer. And so, let me read that to you here. You know, fawn droppings are usually under 1/4 inches long. There's the little things. And you know, usually you find them in puddles. But one thing about droppings in the fall, now, John was starting to see that when you get closer to the time when bucks are making antler rubs and ground scrapes, and later when the does are nested, get closer to that time, bucks seem to have some kind of a diarrhea. Their droppings, they keep their shape, but they get to be soft and sticky, and so their droppings are clumped. When you see them stuck together like that, that's buck droppings. Even little fawns, little buck fawns will sometimes have clump droppings. A clump might be just a little thing like about that big, but bucks have clump droppings in fall, late fall, and during the time that whitetails are breeding. They're not in puddles. Before that, their droppings might be puddles like those of does and yearling does and fawns, but buck droppings in late fall are clumped. Now, keep that in mind. Well, fawn droppings are, like I said, 1/4 inch. You find droppings that are 3/8 of an inch long. That's a yearling doe in Minnesota, in Maine, in Upper Michigan, Pennsylvania. They're 3/8 inch. Now, when you look at a puddle of droppings, you'll see most of them are one size. And some are a little bigger, and some are a little smaller. And you don't measure the bigger or littler ones, you measure the most common size. And 3/8 is the most common size in a puddle of droppings for a yearling doe. Now, mature does are 2.5 years of age or older. And they can be 14 years of age if some of them. But their droppings will be 1/2 inch in length, or up to 3, a little longer, not much more, but about 1/2 inch. And most of the droppings in the puddle will be 1/2 inch in length. And the same is true of yearling bucks. They'll be about 1/2 inch. In the case of yearling bucks, though, in the fall, starting about in a week or so, they'll be clumped 1/2 inch droppings. So when you find them clumped 1/2 inch droppings, you know that was a yearling buck that made those droppings. Now, the next size is 5/8 inch, and that's the size for a 2.5-year-old buck. A little longer than 1/2 inch, and clumped in the fall. So, at 5/8 is a 2.5-year-old buck. Now, the bigger bucks, the 3.5 to 6.5, and not many live to be 7.5. That's pretty small numbers, but are 3/4 to sometimes 1.25 inches in length. And they can have some differences, you know. Some bucks will have kind of narrow, oblong droppings, kind of long, and maybe an inch long, and be kind of narrow looking. And some will have egg-shaped droppings. And so you can have one buck that has 1-inch droppings that are egg-shaped, and another buck that has 1-inch droppings that are kind of long and narrow. That's two different bucks. That's not one buck that made the droppings. So you can have several bucks in the area that have 1-inch dropping, but if they're different, you know, in shape, then it's different bucks that made the droppings. So anyway, 5/8 inch, like I said, is 2.5 now. 3.25 to 1.25 for the big bucks. Boy, you find them 1 inch, you know, 3/4 is pretty common size for a 3.5-year-old buck. And they're nice bucks. They got a nice rack, but there's kind of thin tines, thin bases. And then by the time they're a 4.5, they got heavy bases and a lot more bulk in the antlers. And so their droppings can be a little bigger for those bigger bucks, probably closer to 1 inch. 3/4 for the 3.5, and about 1 inch or bigger for the bigger bucks. So anyway, you can identify the deer that made the droppings by the length of their droppings. And that can be all important when you're out there scouting early, and that's all you're finding out there in the woods is droppings. So keep that in mind. But there's more to know about droppings, kind of information they provide, like the state of alarm of the deer and all kinds of things from droppings. But so that's why there's a lot more to know about droppings and tracks than you'll find on the Sagots, although these are handy little things to carry around the woods. And they even got a measuring ruler on the side so you can measure tracks and droppings with the card alone if you have nothing else along. But anyway, keep that in mind of this book. Now, let's talk about what John found out there. We'll go through this quickly there. On day one, one of the things he did get a chance to clean up some trails that he knows he's going to use because he was finding deer fresh droppings in certain areas. And one of them, you know, we've been looking at it for some years, and we've yet to take a buck there. And but boy, does that look good this year, according to what he found. But anyway, yeah, one of the places he went to was a place. It's kind of a sandy opening. It's kind of a turnaround site for loggers quite a few years ago, and it never really grew up much, although it's getting there. But it's pretty sandy there, and we always find lots of deer tracks there, fresh ones. And he found some again this time. He's got some nice pictures. You'll see them coming up here on this presentation.
This is 2019 scouting, day 1. Smaller tracks here for a yearling, and even smaller tracks here for a fawn.
Fresh ones. And what makes a track fresh? It's sharply defined, you know. The edges aren't all rounded, you know, but it looks like it was just made. Boy, that track is so fresh. You know, all the edges are sharp. You can see that. And it isn't filled with snow or dirt or mud. It's real fresh, clean track. And you're going to see something like that he found. And he found a doe family at this area. And the mature doe, the maternal doe, had 3-inch tracks. That's like what you'd expect, you know. See 3-inch tracks, maternal doe, especially if you find smaller tracks with it. And with them, and you'll see those tracks. He found tracks that are appropriate to the size of a 2.5-year-old doe. And also 2-inch tracks, which are appropriate for the size of a fawn. So he found a mother doe with her yearling of the previous year and a fawn of 2-inch, with the 2-inch tracks. So 3 deer there in that one spot. Now, not far from there, he found a puddle of droppings. And they were kind of old looking, they were getting dried out. But the thing that was exciting about them is they were 1 inch long. And that only means one thing, big buck. And so, but they were old.
Over here we have huge buck droppings. Notice they're unclumped.
But we expected that. Now we've taken bucks in that vicinity, and not far east of there, quite a few actually, and we've had some pretty good buck hunting in that region. And it's nice to know this year there's another one like that, a big trophy class buck with 1 inch droppings. Now these, like I said, those droppings are old, but that's okay. That is absolute evidence of a big buck living in that vicinity. And we know that square mile really well, and it's a tricky square mile, difficult to hunt. You have to take some long detours to make sure you're downwind or crosswind of deer that feed in that area, and that's a tough one to hunt. And John is putting in a new fresh approach trail to a stand site in that area. Well, he's worked on it this year, so that's part of what he was doing up there. And not far from this area, he found bear sign, bear droppings. The bear signs you'll see that he found were not very big. This is a small bear, probably a subadult, or probably not any bear hunter. Well, first time bear might think that's pretty wonderful to see a bear that size, but I don't think it would probably go 100 pounds. It'd be about a 100-pound bear. That means it's a yearling, almost a cub. It's probably no bigger than a black lab. So anyway, then he found some more droppings that were partially clumped, and these were older droppings as well, but they were 3/4 of an inch in length. Now you see, this time of year you start seeing clump dropping, but not quite. They're partially clumped. You'll see some that are pressed together, and but others that have fallen loose, so it's kind of a half puddle, half clump type droppings this time of the year. But 3/4 inch, that's no piker, probably a 3.5-year-old buck. So in that little area, within, I would say 100 yards of one another, he's on those tracks and these droppings, he's found 3 antlerless deer and 2 bucks. One, a really big one, and another one you couldn't turn down walking in front of you. You just couldn't say, no, I'm not going to shoot you. It's a 3.5. Our 3.5-year-old bucks look pretty good. So that's pretty exciting stuff. Now, he found some beds too. Beds can be, in this case, John keeps a good eye out, and so do I. I find this kind of bed easy. This time of year, bucks might be, or whitetails might be laying down in deep grasses. They love deep grasses, and of course it's easy to spot a deer bed in deep grasses. In fact, he found one place where he found a whole family that had probably been bedding, quite a number of beds, and of course doe beds are probably, usually they're in the mature doe are up to 40 inches, 40, sometimes 42, but they're in this smaller, and everything else was smaller, so it was a doe family. And it might have been a yearling buck mixed there. Those beds weren't real distinct, but they were definitely deer beds in all this grass, and looked like they've been using this spot fairly often in bed. It's the size of this room here.
Multiple beds over a period of time have flattened this area compared over there.
The thing about when you see a deer bed on pressed leaves, so they're flattened like that, that deer was probably laying in there while you were approaching. Because You know, you take a bed of pressed leaves, unless they're wet, and they weren't wet, um, uh, they start popping up. And it doesn't take long, a couple hours later, you'd see no impression at all of a bed where that deer had been laying there. So that's a fairly fresh bed, you know. And it was about mature doe-sized bed, but it was a lone one. Now, I can't be absolutely sure because there could have been other beds in the area, but that there's that could have been a yearling buck. Now, what are we talking about here? We're talking about 6 different deer in this square mile already. Okay, so found another bed that was mature doe size, but it was a lone one. And a lone one like that, knowing the doe in that area has young, a single bred that's that size, and you find all the sizes in the book, by the way, or sign guides, but it has to be a yearling buck. He's alone, and they're alone a lot. Now, it's beginning this time of the year. They'll bed with their mothers, and they'll feed with her often, but not always. So they start spending more and more time alone at this time of the year. Now, and I told you about the doe family in these grasses, so that's pretty good deer signs, you know. That's pretty exciting what he found in a relatively small area. 3 bucks, a big one, 1-inch droppings, a 3.5-year-old with 3/4-inch droppings, a yearling buck. Well, I didn't see the droppings, but we saw the bed, so you learned that already. My goodness, that kind of an area is something you're going to want to spend some significant time in at the beginning of a hunting season, for sure. Okay. Now, let's see, let's go a little further. Another 44-inch bed in deep grass.
So this is about a 44-inch bed.
That's getting to be 2.5-year-old buck size. You know, 45, 44, 45. And that was in deep grass. A 2.5-year-old buck. Now we're talking about another buck. Yeah, and that buck that in the deep grass, this 2.5-year-old buck, he was laying where he could watch this wide valley down below. Good place to be spotted, maybe spot wolves or hunters coming in from the left, that kind of thing. So they do that all the time, of course. That's why it takes some special trail making to be able to get into an area like this without all those bucks knowing about it, you know. But wouldn't it be great come opening morning and see them all? Wouldn't that be something? Then, not far from there, he found another puddle of 1-inch droppings, close to where he's taken a buck. One at 3 feet. How about that? Okay. Well, not far from there, yeah, he found a velvet rub. Now, bucks shed their velvet in our country and almost everywhere, actually, in the northern states, about the 1st September. And it takes them a few days, 3 days about, to finally get to finish the job. And it's almost a rule that wherever they do it, I mean, it just isn't something they do someplace. It's usually close to where they bed. And where he found this velvet rub is close to where bucks bed. There's a little hill there in that area, covered with mature pines and other stuff underneath there. But it's been a favorite bedding area of big bucks since 1990. They love that place to bed. And so that would make sense. That's where you would find velvet. Well, this first one was on a pine tree, a young one, and he pretty well destroyed it. He got it all torn up.
Looks like a velvet rub. Well, this is too early for any other kind of rub other than a velvet rub.
Working on getting his velvet off his antlers. Okay. Well, we found a place where we're not sure about the sign. You know, it's common, especially in the spring. Black bears do a lot of digging for roots in the spring. You know, they come out of the den. Not a lot of food in the woods at that time. They'll eat a lot of grass, but not the kind of nourishment bears like. But then they'll start digging for shallow roots in the ground, various trees, including roots of elders. And you'll find these kind of dug out areas next to elders and other trees where they dug in the ground and opened roots, and you see these bare roots and they've been ripped off. You see that? And that's bear sign normally. But he found another spot. Might have been that we know there's a bear in that area. I'll show you something about that big bear in a little bit here. But it might have been digging for roots there. Maybe with food being kind of scarce that time of the year, early September, most of the berries are gone. And so might have been digging roots. But it kind of was mindful too of a ground scrape made by a buck. It's kind of early for that, but sometimes bucks will make ground scrapes at unusual times. So we're not sure about that. But when John went up there, he got up there and it was kind of bad weather and it was late, and he decided to sleep in his truck, in his car, in his SUV. And that first day when he got back there, he found tracks on a trail right close to his truck, right around that area. A bear track, a big one. You'll get to see them. Yeah, the claw marks are not distinct, but when I measure bear tracks, those are part of what I look for. This track was a good 8.5 inches long. That's a big bear. He'll go over 300 pounds. That's a trophy class black bear. Hanging around his vehicle. It was a big one. Nice track in a muddy spot on this trail. So you get a chance to look at it. You find tracks like that and you're a bear on it, you get excited. That's the kind of bear you want to take. So the next day, day 2, John went back to another area that we've been finding deer sign there forever, but we haven't had much luck in that area. I took a big buck in that area quite a few years ago. That was a 7.5-year-old buck. Nice buck, 13-pointer. Okay, now, back in that area, it was scouting an area we've been looking at for years, and we haven't had a lot of luck in that particular area. John got one nice buck, one on the wall, I think it's upstairs, that he took in that region. Yeah. Well, actually, both of them, yeah, those two. Here's another one, another trophy buck of his. So 2 of them there. Well, and then, in that area, he saw a doe family, several deer. He didn't see antlers, but there's he saw a bunch of them off to his left, going up on this ridge, we call it North Ridge. He found some fresh clump droppings, as he keeps saying that. Droppings 5/8 inch in length. 2.5-year-old buck, no doubt about it. Then a little while later he found another set, same size, even fresher, but 2.5-year-old buck for sure, living in that area. Now that's another buck. Now, we pass up 2.5-year-old bucks quite often. But later in the season, if we haven't taken our four, we always just want to take 4 mature bucks each year, going over $100. We start looking at 2.5-year-olds pretty seriously, so you never know. So, but we know the whereabouts of another one. But this is far enough away from that earlier findings that this has to be a different buck in a different area. So, found fresh doe droppings there, and
See how this looks like mature doe dropping, and mixed in you'll notice some hail. Middle of a hailstorm, for Pete's sakes. This is really close to those fawn droppings.
well, I found fresh droppings 1/4 inch in length.
Fawn droppings over behind Whale Rock.
That only means there's a mature doe in that area too. You know, you don't have to see the doe to know that those kind of droppings come from a fawn. There's got to be a doe with it. So, the fawns are always close to their mothers until deer hunting. Sometimes they get separated. So, then I found some fresh 1/2-inch droppings in that area, and you know. Now, 1/2 inch, we know that's got to be mature doe or yearling buck. Well, they were almost clumped. They're pressed together, and you know, so they're flattened out. So that can only mean one kind of deer, yearling buck. So in that area, almost right away, found 2 bucks, a yearling and a 2.5-year-old. Now he was quite a ways away from where he found those first droppings that were 5/8 inch, and he found another set, fairly fresh, really fresh. And it was at a distance. Now, a 2.5-year-old buck will have a home range, probably about, at the most, I would say 150 to maybe 200 acres. Inside of a square mile, owned by a big boss dominant buck. Now, this second set of droppings was well beyond that distance. That was down there by the Whale Rock area. So, that was a different buck, for sure. Very fresh, so we know about 2.5-year-old bucks in there. A good mile away, oh yeah, a good mile away from where he initially found 1-inch droppings of a monster buck, trophy class buck. He found some more quite a bit to the east of this area, in an area where I took that big 13-pointer over in that area, and some more 1-inch droppings. They were older droppings, you know.
So this is approaching the saddle area on North Ridge. Awful big buck here. This is what I've been looking for.
But they tell it, when you see them, we know where, you know, they were puddles, puddle droppings, because they weren't clumped yet, because they were older. But we know that there's another big buck over in that area.
This is right next to the Whale Rock. So this is on the stand site approach trail to the point stand.
Now, if you're a buck hunter, what more could you want than to find something like this? So we'll be going back, and I'm sure John's going to want to spend some time over there figuring out where he's going to sit, you know, find a good cover for stand sites, and clean up some deer trails so he can get to them without making a lot of noise, and things like that, which really pay off. And so he's done a good job. You know, if he didn't find anything else at all, the rest of the deer scene, he's got a pretty good spot area there to work on this coming year for hunting bucks. So, and all sizes. So with that, we'll be doing more. We'll be talking more about it. But this tells you what knowing about knowing how to identify deer from the lengths of their droppings, how important that can be when you're scouting. Sometimes that's all you get, and like I said earlier, I've taken quite a few bucks with no more evidence than that. So then some very fresh 1-inch droppings on a special trail somewhere, or close to a bedding area, or adjacent to a feeding area, things like that. If it's feeding, well, that's the feeding area I want to hunt, you see? So that's what kind of stuff you like to find. So with that, I'm going to say goodbye to you guys, and do me a favor, will you please? Press that subscribe button down there at the bottom, that red one down there, right down there. Do that as a favor for me, I really would appreciate it. And then poke that little thumbs up button as well if you like what you've learned today. It's pretty valuable stuff. Keep that in mind. Like I told you, this is all you really need to be a regularly successful buck hunter. This kind of information about deer droppings is really valuable. And don't poo-poo it. Yeah, so, poo-poo it. That's the appropriate term for this, eh? Okay. Thanks a lot, guys. I'll see you again soon. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.